Well, Joe, thank you so much for helping with my project. I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about yourself.
My name is Joe Parrish. Graduated with you, ironically enough. Went into the U.S. Army, worked with weapons of mass destruction for a little while. Got out, got some degrees in environmental science and biology, and I do some environmental work with dealing with toxicology and lab results.
That's awesome. And I remember in high school and middle school, you, myself, Chris Garrison, and several other people used to be real big advocates about space exploration. You know, we watched Star Trek and all these other things. Do you remember kind of how we saw the world of exploration at that time?
Do you remember it was either a moon program or a Mars program that Miss May, our biology teacher, wrote us into?
I do, yeah. It was like a NASA project for high schoolers to put together sort of an outline of how to make it to Mars. And I think we also had like Jason Eastman on that, and I'm trying to remember who else. Jeffrey Perkins, maybe?
Maybe I think we three were the core: you, myself, and Chris. And if I remember right, Miss May's Misfits worked just well for the group name.
Yeah. But I mean, that was actually, you know, maybe a month or 2 month long project. I mean, we we had like the Delton Federation used to write fiction way back then. We were big Heinlein fans and Asimov fans, and I mean, I think at that point, if I remember right, the idea that we would be exploring out into space seemed like something that's just around the corner. And I mean, is that how you remember it too, or?
Well, yes and no. I remember the hope. I remember the dream, but I also remembered we stopped going to the moon in 72 and hadn't been back. And we graduated in 94. So it had been over 20 years and not even a real effort to go back to the moon.
And even like science in general, I remember we were supposed to have a big super collider built around Austin in like, the mid 90s, but with like the whole push to balance the budget and what have you, that thing is now just an empty tunnel.
I'd like to see that tunnel. I forgot all about it. Yeah, the Waxahachie project gave way to the Large Hadron Collider in Europe. Yeah, tunnel's probably still there. There was a lot of hope, don't get me wrong, but there was also a lot of wonder, I think, from our generation. Why weren't we going back to the moon? Why were we focusing more on Earth? And a lot of people were rightly saying, and still are rightly saying, why aren't we focusing more on Earth instead of focusing on outer space?
And what's your feelings there?
Uh, you familiar with the law of unintended consequences?
I experience it all the time.
I think there's a corollary to it in science, in that if you intend to go exploring for something and finding a particular way, you can do it. It's going to take you a lot of time, it's going to take you a lot of effort, maybe a lot of funding. But if you just want to share that information with somebody who works outside your field, it's a breakthrough moment for them. Uh, think about I forget it's the fellow's name, but the fellow who helped with microwave generation and discovered that his Hershey bar had melted in his chocolate in his pocket. And so his chocolate bar melted, and now we have microwaves that are commonplace today. It's that law of unintended consequences means that the science we aim for we wind up having to go a different direction because of the science other people are working with.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, to think about the way our astronauts have pretty much their entire schedule is kind of micromanaged and kind of do this experiment, and the guy that's really sort of proposing it and analyzing the results, um, he is on the ground and not really experiencing that thing.
Yeah. I just learned about I don't know if you heard, Space Lab had a rebellion back in the 70s. Did you hear about that?
Oh, yeah. Now, it's funny. The astronauts actually say, you know, that it really wasn't a rebellion. That no one was just monitoring the ground radio, and that type of thing. But yeah, I had heard about that.
Sometimes you need a break, and despite the micromanagement, I think we humans we need a little bit of a break now and again. We need downtime.
Yeah, and but back to your Hershey bar example, it's like I mean, can you imagine the world without a microwave? And to think that that just happened as an accident, I mean, it's like we need to get more observers, curious observers into this unique environment to stimulate, those kind of quick turns of insights testing type thing.
It's diversity. Without space program, we would not have the kind of diversity we need in the sciences because it's not Earth. We get too complacent here, and to face such a hostile environment as space, and to overcome the technological obstacles we need to. Every little advancement out of there has a strange application back here. And I think medicine is going to benefit the most from the next century or so of space travel because we kind of evolved here. And going somewhere else with a whole different kind of gravity, a whole different kind of environment, I'm looking forward to the law of unintended consequences.
And so your argument would be um, going to space will help us on Earth, but we don't know how until we do it.
Correct.
And how do you think that argument might be received by the general population?
Well, the general population likes to have quick and easy results and likes to know that its scientists are on the ball and right on target. And as the press kind of pointed out in the last 6 months with the quarantine and COVID-19, the scientists change their minds when new information comes in. So they feel like the scientists are being wishy-washy on this whole mask or no mask, effective or not effective. But we learn in fits and starts. It's kind of like Stephen Jay Gould's punctuated equilibrium. We have some crazy stagnant, we don't understand what's going on. It takes us forever to figure it out. And then suddenly, hey, we got it. Next breakthrough, please.
That's a good point. People are more willing to follow people that are confident as opposed to people that are unsure. And I actually saw an up close personal example of this. About 14 years ago, 13 years ago, my oldest son had like some type of issue with like his fourth metacarpal. And we took him to the doctor, and they did some tests and what have you, and the doctor came back and said, "I'm perplexed," and that was the absolutely wrong thing for a mother to hear. Mothers do not want to hear about the perplexedness of doctors. She wants to do this thing and everything will be fine. And I think that probably is a good reflection of the general population as well.
We like confident leaders. I remember when I was in the Army, it was better to be wrong confidently than be right tentatively.
And, I think because of this, you're starting to see a kind of like a resurgence of people grabbing onto tradition and to religion and to, those types of things. And I was wondering if you felt the same way, if you see that.
Maybe. I kind of feel like the media is having a part in that, but not the way we think. Think about before flash photography in newspapers. People would draw what they needed to. You'd hire an artist to put what you needed to in the newspaper, and that became whatever the news was. And so the artist got to direct the picture, much as the writer gets to direct their slant on media nowadays. And it's so easy to create our own media with the World Wide Web and the free flow of information. We can go somewhere and find very confident views that match our own and allow us to go further down a rabbit hole that doesn't make us explore things.
Yeah, that's very true. And you kind of, as you were saying that, I was thinking about, you still have like the court sketchers, where they don't allow for cameras. But I haven't seen any of those recently. Maybe we just hadn't had a high profile enough trial. I almost feel like they just wait until the entrance and exit of the people from the courtroom, and that's what you get to see on the screen.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but nowadays with cell phones and photography being so super common everywhere, you're right. I think those pictures are coming out of the court rather than in the court because everybody can take a picture now.
But you know, you kind of touched on something that this project has also touched on, and that is we no longer get news in the same way that we used to in the 1960s and the 1970s. That where we used to have 3 broadcast television stations and maybe 1 or 2 newspapers per major city and a couple of national magazines, and if you had something that was in all of those things, everybody literally knew it. But today, you can be barraged with your only microcosm of whatever your interests are, and you don't necessarily choose that. It's like being chosen for you as you interact with the media, right?
Yeah. Well, when you and I were younger, we knew certain reporters that we could trust for information. Walter Cronkite, Peter Jennings, many others. We would trust whatever information they had to give us. Nowadays, I can't even think of the name of a single reporter I can really trust unbiased other than Clark Kent. So,
Yeah, and you know the interesting thing about that trust, that means they had a reputation that needed to be protected. That means that the stories they relayed had to rise to a certain standard, and that also means that a reputation could be challenged. Whereas now, anybody could say anything, and if you get enough people to pass it on and repeat it, it must be true. It's like what is it? Uh, was it Brave New World, where so many repetitions equal truth?
yeah. Well, the flip side of that is anytime I open the news and I'll admit, it looks depressing nowadays. It's page after page of terrible, horrible things. And maybe you see one little bright ray of sunshine in that. But I've got some other tabs open on my computer. I can flip to the science news. I can flip in and see the new articles. We forget how many groundbreaking strides we're making in so many different subjects and so many different sciences. So this whole race to the moon and beyond thing is it's another bit of exciting.
It is. I do worry though about the science side, the pressure to publish and the need to just fill up journals month after month with stuff, regardless of how important and groundbreaking that stuff is. Because I get Nature and I get Science News. There's a big difference between the two. Uh, and uh, you know, Nature, I can read like maybe the first 10%, and then at that point, I have cognitive fatigue, and it's beyond my ability not only to understand it, but to actually go and research it enough to even pretend like I understand it. So, whereas Science News, I can just read anytime and not good. But yeah,
Well, it's that difference between a primary source and a secondary source. With Nature, you're seeing that primary source from the researchers for the most part. But with Science News, you're getting it secondhand from somebody who's translating it for you. And maybe you get a little bit of their translation bias, but it's still at the same time the programming that you do on a day-to-day basis. I no that's over my head. I would be lost with what you're doing. I'd need a translator. And if you don't have the time to do it, I'll happily pay somebody else to do it so I can get a feel for what's going on. And
oh,
it's the same with
exactly.
the rockets and the 3D printing technology. And I have no clue what kind of technologies are being used right now for most of the space race. It is way over my head. I can't do the math. I don't understand the material science. There's no way in hell I could calculate Q values for any of those rocket engines. I still like to hear about it. It's still fascinating. And that law of unintended consequences, who knows? Maybe in, looking at a little bit of it, it might make a difference in my world.
Well, and you know, coming back to like the news thing, I've done about 260 of these interviews so far. And of them, I would say only about 50 of them knew that we're going to the moon in 2024. In fact, one of them even said, "Why is NASA keeping it a secret?" So that just gives you an idea on the different experiences we have with news.
Well, it depends on where you get your news. If all you're going to is CNN or Fox or MSNBC, you're not going to see those on the front page. They're not going to make the lead. It's a
So
secret.
you think as we actually start making progress and we actually see it on those channels that it rise to the awareness, or do you think there's a real risk that even then it may not be
I
known?
think Because we tend to only see the spectacular failures, I think those are the only things that are going to make the front page of the main newspapers. The little successes are going to be completely lost to the general public unless they go looking for them until there's a big success. Woo! We put another man on the moon, or first woman on the moon, or first African American on the moon, or first Asian on the moon, or first anything else. Until then, nobody's going to notice. The general public won't know, and that's okay.
I almost feel like if we put a dog on the moon, that would be more attention grabbing than anything else.
Or a cat, yeah.
Our cat.
I'm all for that. Yeah, first cat on the moon is going to have a following. You watch. That'll be the biggest Instagram following on Earth. I'm all for that.
Yeah. So you're into environmental science, and you know rockets look to be dirty, and there's lots of rocket testing and things like that. You know, and kind of ironically, or maybe it's kind of like a budgeting thing. You know, you have Elon Musk on one side with his Tesla and solar power, and then you have him on the other side building these huge rockets that are, you know, burning lots and lots of carbon. I was wondering, from your experience in environmental science, what are the risks to the Earth of actual rocket testing, rocket launching, and all these things?
Well, we have to make sure we differentiate between short-term risk and long-term risk, and whether we're actually talking about the global biosphere or whether we're really talking about humanity. And as far as the Earth is concerned, long-term, we're a blip on the bloody radar. Whether we wipe ourselves out or not, it's going to be fine. If we detonate all the nukes we've got, Earth will still be fine in 10,000 years or so. Maybe a reduced species variability, but it'll be fine. Our real focus then is not on the long term, it's on how does that affect us and maybe the species we kind of like right now. And the answer to that one is, well, we're not going to know how toxic it is until it's too late for many things. We're still learning right now about how toxic microplastics are. The active ingredient in Teflon, for example, can be found in almost every human in the industrialized world, but we don't know what effect it's having. We just found out about, what was it, bisphenol A having an effect on hormones in humans within the last few decades. We're not going to know until it's too late for most of those. Luckily, most of them won't wipe us out. If it's too toxic, we'll find out real quick, but the long-term toxicity is going to be a real problem.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny, you know, as you talk about the long-term trends and human activity. I mean, I think the people in California and Oregon are way more concerned about the burning of natural products rather than combustion engines at this point.
Well, that's a management issue. That was an intentional management problem that they created from the word go.
In the terms of not doing routine burning and thinning of the forest and
I mean, the
like
redwoods themselves cannot germinate without fire. That tells you how often fire is supposed to take place in those ecosystems. And the California government said, no fire at all. Fire bad. So that's why we're in the position we're in.
Yeah, you could try to stay awake as long as you want. You could succeed for a few days, but eventually you're going to fall asleep, whether or not you want to or not.
Well, it happened. We face a similar issue in Southeast Texas. When you and I were teenagers, pine beetles were a major problem throughout Southeast Texas. The beetles were just destroying the pine plantations that the paper industry was relying on. And so they had to go through and they had to do some burning, they had to do some culling. It was a major problem. And it turned out from some of the studies, they believed that some of that problem came back to not enough burning, not enough fire.
Because they had uninterrupted habitat. They didn't get killed off in batches.
Well, there wasn't enough of a buffer between the pine trees with other plants.
So they were all connected and they just easily went out, whereas you would burn off some things and that would kind of bisect various. That's an interesting phenomenon.
Well, that was part of the problem. I'm sure species diversity was another bit of it. But we're finding out as we go, and that's part of the human experience. We learn little bits piecemeal, and maybe eventually somebody from outside of our field will say, I could use that. That's awesome. And we make a big breakthrough.
Now, whenever you think about the future of humanity, like the next 500 years, do you feel like it's like inevitable that we'll branch out from the Earth and start colonizing the solar system? Or do you think there's still a good chance that we'll just be stuck here on Earth, making these little weekend trips to places, taking, galactic selfies?
Are you familiar with the panspermia theory?
I am.
There's lots of indicators right now, stronger and stronger evidence, especially thanks to the ISS and some of the colonies of bacteria they found on the ISS for years, still viable in solar radiation, in the vacuum of space. I think we're going to find more life out there than we intended in strange and interesting places. So we're already out there. It's inevitable. We're going to be in space. It may take us 300 or 400 years for it to get more common, but I think it's inevitable.
Well, and I personally feel that like the 2020s are going to be the space exploration with the things that like SpaceX is doing, Blue Origin's doing, the commercial lunar payload services, the Artemis, the all these other things. It's going to be to space exploration what the 1990s were to the internet. And am I being overly optimistic, or do you think there's a hope that could be too, that in like 2030, our conversation would be completely different than what we're having now?
The law of unintended consequences says that trying to predict the future any distance out borders on hubris. So I think if there are setbacks, given time, though, we'll step over them. Maybe we'll take another 2 or 3 decade hiatus from the moon or from space exploration, but we'll be back. It calls to us.
So not placing any bets, but and also it sounds like don't want to do any predicting either. Just let it come and enjoy it.
Well, trying to predict it, just a personal bias, but I think trying to predict the future, make sure that that particular future doesn't take place, because so much else happens in trying to make that one thing happen. If you're not flexible enough, reality creeps in. Maybe that was just reading too much Michael Crichton when I was younger.
Yeah. Oh, what's your favorite Michael Crichton book?
I would honestly still have to say Jurassic Park.
Did you read Airframe?
Airframe. No, I'm not familiar with that one. What was it about?
It's about airline company and manufacturing and parts. I thought it was really well done. Somebody had recommended it. I would not have picked it up just looking at the title, but I enjoyed it. So.
Okay. No, I'll have to look for that one. Airframe.
Airframe. Yeah.
Okay.
So if it was safe and affordable, would you consider taking a trip to space?
Sure.
No.
How? No.
So my wife was like, nope, nope. I would. She can stay here.
No, you won't. I need you here.
Apparently, there are some safety issues that are a little questionable, so it would have to be really safe, like flying safe.
Yeah, I'm facing some of these challenges myself. In fact, I had this dream of my 2 sons and my wife and I going on one of those zero-G flights, where you get to experience the parabolic flights. So we did, but my wife, I couldn't convince her to go. She said, somebody has to survive or somebody has to live. So, but it was really a good trip. So, yeah.
You come back to that societal difference between men and women. Women are a little bit more conservative in risking life and limb. At least they seem to be that way. I would like to be proven wrong.
Well, and maybe it goes back to evolutionary traits, like benefits. I mean, if you have to raise young, you're going to be a different viewpoint of the world rather than having to go out there and get food. And
Mama Nature's always said that we men are the expendable ones. It's the women that are a little bit more valuable to the history. So, us guys, we'll go ahead and pay that money and take those trips and enjoy a couple of space tourism adventures and come home to cold shoulders from wives. And maybe some of them will go along too.
Maybe, I hope so. Well, we're almost at the end of the half hour. Is there, so I kind of envision this series of, so I mean, the purpose of these interviews is number one, I connect with another human at least once a day. So thank you so much for letting me do that.
My
But
pleasure.
also, kind of like a longer term thing is I'm like thinking, I'm envisioning like 2100 high schooler on the moon having to write a research paper. What were people thinking before the new space age? And this would be like source material for them. So in that context, is there anything you would like to tell to that high schooler in 2100 on the moon?
Yeah. We look at the kids from 100 years ago and think, my gods, how could they not know all this? It was right in front of you the whole time. Why didn't you just listen to this or that scientist? Why didn't you look in that direction? Nah, they'll know that.
Of course, you say that, and then you read H.G. Wells, you know, The War of the Worlds, and you're like, wow, you know, he like knew, I mean, like a lot of the things that he described about Mars appears to be right on. Um, I mean, they have guns launching people into rockets, but that's, we're actually talking about doing that too, you know, big.
Well, that reminds me of that difference between Isaac Asimov's science fiction and Robert Heinlein's science fiction. Robert Heinlein is very, very technical, and he included that in his science fiction. The technicalities did not stand the test of time because science and technology kind of gained. He introduced it, he showed it could be done. Isaac Asimov didn't bother to bring that into his stories, and they would stand the test of time a little bit better because rather than make the science that focus, it was the story that stayed with us. And to the kid in 2100 or wherever looking back on this from the moon doing their research paper, the stories are still going to capture their attention.
Yeah, I mean, then they'll be like, should we be going to Mars? We should develop the moon, you know, we need to make the best of what we have here.
And they'll probably be looking ahead the same way we're looking ahead, wondering, I wonder what the guy on Ceres is going to be writing about me.
Exactly.
All right, Nathan. Well, it's good talking with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. And you have a good rest of your day. And if you convince any other family member or friend to participate, I would love to talk to them.
I'll see how they respond.
Okay. Pretty much everybody I've interviewed said it was fun. So I just thought I'd toss that out there.
It is. It's good to talk to you again, Nathan.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.